Okay, so our next notebook sample, we are going to shear or gather a seam. So I tell you to cut out a piece of fabric that's 10 inches long. Let's see here, so I'm just gonna kind of mark where that is and just kind of pull and tear it, I think. Be fine. Okay. This guy, I'll just cut it. Okay. And the 10-inch one, we're kind of making like a ruffle also, so I just called it out to only be 2 inches wide. If you want to make it more than 2 inches wide, that's not really a big deal. That's totally fine. Okay. And then the other piece I call out to be just 5 inches by 5 inches. So let's see if that will work. Okay, I'm gonna cheat and do it 4 inches by 5 inches because I don't want to waste fabric. It's just a notebook sample. Okay. It's still gonna work though, don't worry. I have my 5-inch seam. Okay, so I'm gonna sew this seam that's 10 inches long to the seam that's 5 inches long. Remember our ease seam we just did? That would be so hard to ease this guy to this. I dare say it would be impossible. So luckily we're not easing it together. Instead we're gathering, making a sheared seam. So in order to get him to be this width, I'm gonna start by sewing in a basting stitch. Actually, I'm gonna do 2 rows of a basting stitch along the seam allowance on this guy. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the sewing machine and do that. Okay, now do you remember how to do a basting stitch? Couple things to review. We don't need a back stitch, so I don't wanna do that. And it's gonna make my life easier if I use a long stitch. So I'm gonna change my stitch length to 5, just one of the longer ones. Okay, I'm gonna line up my raw edge against the foot here, and I'm gonna try to use that to sew a straight line. And here I go. Okay, get all the way to the edge. And again, I don't like to sew if there's no fabric because it can cause a jam. Okay, make sure my take-up lever's all the way up high. I can lift up my presser foot and pull it out towards the back. I'm gonna leave my thread kind of long. I don't wanna cut it super short, so it'll be easier for me to get my hands on it and pull it later. See, I kind of left it kind of long trail, little tail. Okay, now I'm gonna do a second row right next to it. So I'm gonna line up the stitch I just did with the edge of the foot. No back stitch, just straight line. Don't get crooked at the end. Great, and I'm done. Okay, so my take-up lever is up high, presser foot's up, pull it towards the back, and I'm kind of leaving a long tail. Okay, let's take a look at this guy. All right, got my 2 rows. So now I have 4 threads here, right? I've got 2 top threads and 2 bottom threads. So I guess I'll just pull the 2 bottom ones. You can pull the 2 top instead if you want. Just don't pull a top and a bottom or this won't work. And you can take a moment to really like appreciate the stitch. See, when I pull it, a little loop comes up. That's the thread on the top. Okay. All right, I'm pulling it, just the 2 bottom ones, and see how it kind of scrunches when I do that? Yeah. So I'm gonna keep scrunching until my 10-inch fabric is 5 inches wide. If I want, I can hop to the other side and start scrunching on this side. Okay, I'll be honest with you guys, for years, I used to only do 1 row of basting. Can you believe it? I thought it was faster. And it does work with just 1 row, but now in my older age, I've realized 2 rows is a little bit better in case one breaks. And then also, I think you have more control to kind of like play with what the gathers looks like when you kind of pull it straight. I feel like by having 2 rows, it kind of pulls it to be more straight and pretty, where when I used to only do 1 row, it'd be kind of wild. I don't know, but I'm not gonna hold it against you if you only do 1 row, because I know how it is. Okay, but here we go. So I did 2 rows. I'm gonna go take this to my sewing table and find out if it's 5 inches wide, If it's not, I'll keep messing with it until it is and get it ready to sew to my swatch. Okay, here's my swatch that's 5 inches long. And here is my other swatch that was 10 inches long. Ooh, now it's shorter, so now I can actually bring it bigger. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put right sides together, because that's what we have to do, we have to sew it as a seam anyways. And I'm gonna line up this raw edge. Let me grab my pins. I'm gonna pin my raw edges together on the edge, and I'm gonna go ahead and pin this edge together too. And then I can kind of pull this guy. Then I kind of know where I need to be. Okay, cool. So it's about 5 inches, but it's pretty flat right here and really heavily sheared here. So I kind of want to distribute that fullness evenly if possible. That would be nice. A little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and pin this guy down. And pull. I don't have that much shearing on the edge. There we go. Okay. All right, I think I'm ready to go take it to the machine and sew the seam. I'm gonna use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So quick question, do you guys think factories spend all this time that we just spent shearing the fabric and kind of distributing it evenly? I'm still kind of annoyed. I feel like I need more over here, so I should probably play with that a little bit and try to fix it. If you said no, you don't think so, you're right. Usually there's actually some presser feet that can help with shearing automatically. This guy, he's adjustable. If you loosen the screw, this little plate comes out a little bit longer and it goes back in. And you can just take a single layer of fabric and it'll shear it for you. And so that, again, you can adjust it. If you want more shearing, you pull it out more, or less, you push it in, or vice versa. I kind of forget. But this guy, he can't adjust the shearing. It's kind of just one amount of shearing allowed on this foot. But what's kind of cool is that it can do the seam at the same time. So you put in the shorter piece of fabric here in the top, like there's like a little slit, and then the longer piece of fabric goes underneath on the bottom, and it sews a seam while it shears the longer piece of fabric. So, so that's super fast and easy. And it also does it nice and evenly, which is kind of cool. So, I mean, these are for our Juki machines, the industrial machines, but your home machine might actually have a shearing foot. You guys should check. It's more common than you think. Or if you see yourself doing this technique a ton, you might want to invest in a shearing foot. They usually aren't very expensive. I would say like less than 10 bucks probably. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that there is an easier way if you see yourself doing, you know, yards and yards and yards of this technique. Okay, I'm at my sewing machine and I am ready to sew my gathered seam. I do like to sew with the gathers up, just kind of like to see how it's going into the machine. I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I'm lining up my raw edge to the engraved line by the 1/2 mark. And okay, I'm gonna make sure my stitch length is like normal stitch length, like a 3, and I'm gonna backstitch. Okay, take out my pins. There's no reason to sew on my pins, and just feed it through the machine. So sometimes when I'm at the machine, like you can kind of control the way your gathers fold. If you don't like the way it's folding, just make sure your needle's down. You can lift up your presser foot and kind of just like rearrange it. Or you can just send it through the machine and just see how it turns out. make sure your take-up lever is in the highest position. Lift up your foot, pull your fabric towards the back, trim off the thread. Okay, what do we think? Looks okay. Now let's open it up. Not sure what that was. Cool, isn't it cute? Cute little ruffle, my little gathers, that's so fun. I think that turned out pretty good. Yeah, but I'm gonna run it over to the iron and just give it a press, and that's it. Okay, so I just ironed my seam that I just sewed. I did notice I can still see some of my basting stitch. Looks like maybe, oh yeah, look, I'm off on my 1/2 inch seam allowance. My raw edge aren't lined up evenly. Uh-oh, that's okay. No big deal. I'm just gonna take out the basting stitch so we don't have to see it. I don't really think it's gonna affect the fit of the garment or anything. So I'm definitely not gonna take it out and redo it if that's what you were thinking. No, let's just pull out our basting stitch. That's what seam rippers are for. Okay, cool. See, now if anyone sees it from this side, they'll have no idea that my raw edge is uneven, right? That's none of their business if you ask me. Okay, cool. So there we go. I have a great gathered seam. I turned a 10-inch long piece of fabric down to 5 inches and sewed a seam. Shearing, gathering, seam.